Welcome to the Orthodontic Pearls Podcast, where we share tips and tricks to better your clinic, business, and life. Today, we have our honored guest, Tony Peniche, as we discuss marketing strategies, challenges in business, and his many entrepreneurial endeavors. And now your hosts of the podcast, Drs. Chris Teeters, Brian Anderson, and Andy Sarpadar.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm really excited today. We have a very special guest with us, Tony Peniche. Some of you may have heard of him through Leanne Peniche, who's a very famous consultant for TCs in our profession. Tony is a marketing guru, creative mastermind, entrepreneur, all-around good guy. Say hello, Tony. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for that nice introduction. I think it's fair to say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So, growing up as, I guess you could call me like a hyper creative, growing up in a household with Leanne, who's a, business development mastermind. Yeah, it's been nice to naturally have the creative side and then be basically mentored and groomed for the business development side. Has made for, a nice path for my career.
We're happy to have you on the show, Tony. Thanks for being with us today. As always, we have Dr. Brian Anderson and Dr. Chris Teeters. How are you doing today, Brian?
Fantastic. It's Friday, man.
It is Friday. We don't have work. It's any day. Any day we don't have to clock in is a good day, huh? And then how are you doing over there, Chris Teeters? I see you've got the Echoverse t-shirt on. That's Kyle's band, right?
Yeah. Representing Kyle here, of course. I love the music. I love the logo, especially since we're talking about branding and logos. I love how the O in Echoverse just draws your eyes almost like you're being in a trance. I just thought it was very creative yet simple. So yeah, representing Kyle today.
And the O is almost like an echo, right? It's like reverberating.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And it's a verse because it's a Christian prog rock band. So I mean, the name is perfect for them.
Very cool. All right, guys. Well, we have a lot to cover today. I'd like to start off, Tony. Now you do the marketing. You're the marketing consultant, coordinator, whatever you want to call that, for Leanne Peniche. And I think that's how you and Chris originally met up. So tell us a little bit about that position, how you got started with it, and maybe some of the top pearls that you have for us.
And basically, Leanne started the company basically like as soon as I was born. And I think when you're younger, you don't necessarily think that what your parents do is all that interesting. I thought it was somewhat interesting, but I didn't fully understand what it was that she was doing. So I didn't actually have any interest in joining the family business. Basically, from the time I was 16, I was already starting to, I filed for my first patents when I was 16, started building my first company when I was 18. And then all throughout my 20s, built and sold several companies. And again, just didn't have any interest in joining the family business because I didn't fully understand what was going on over here. And then about 6 years ago, I had sold my last company. And at that time, Smile Direct Club and Candid and a lot of these, braces in a box type companies were popping up, and they were scaring everybody in our industry. And so Leanne asked me if I would come in, basically before I launched my next company, if I would come in for 6 months and help with the marketing and branding with a bunch of our clients. And so, yeah, for the first 6 months, I committed to, going on the road and meeting with these different orthodontists and seeing how we can level up their marketing and branding efforts to be able to compete with these larger aligner companies. And I have to admit, like within the first 8 weeks, I knew that this was not just going to be 6 months. Like I fell in love with it pretty much immediately. I really like the startup process. I like coming up with marketing strategies and definitely inventing new tactics whenever I can. And basically every week I'm in a different office and I get to have, in my mind, it's kind of like a reset. And to me, it feels like a startup. They might've been in business for 15 years already, but to me, it's brand new. And so for my personality type and my interest, and just kind of the way I operate, being a consultant and working with lots of different offices actually fits my personality perfectly. So it was supposed to be for 6 months and it's already been 6 years.
That's fantastic. And we're going to come back to that personality stuff a little bit later. I'm chomping at the bit to talk about that, but I have some speculations on why that is. But now when you first met Chris, this was at actually the Peniche TC Intensive. Is that correct?
I think we've met at a couple meetings here and there, but yeah, we didn't really get a chance to sort of hang out and dive deeper until I think Breakfast with Tony at the TCI is when I had a little bit more time.
Well, if you follow us on the forum, the Orthodontic Pearls Facebook group, everyone's aware that Chris just did a pretty big rebrand now that he is the sole owner of his practice. And, I'd like to hear a little bit about that experience, Chris, and maybe any input that Tony was involved with in that process. And then, Tony, I'd like for you to maybe weigh in on just how orthodontists do with their branding, with their marketing in general. So we'll start with you, Chris. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
First of all, kudos to Breakfast with Tony. It was totally unexpected. I brought my TC team and the rest of my team to more learn some ways to communicate and improve the TC process. And then later that morning or the next morning, we had Breakfast with Tony, and he was following a lot like what I do when we lecture and the whole idea behind Pearls, which is quick, actionable things you can implement right away in your practice versus, a 2-hour lecture and you walk away with one pearl and there's a bunch of setup, where I'm always into just give me what I need to know so I can run with it. So that morning at Breakfast with Tony, I'm just like, I'm writing so fast as if I have a pop quiz coming up where I didn't want to miss anything. And there's so much valuable information in terms of, rebranding. It was everything that we were looking for, and I didn't expect it. So I came back and said, hey, we got to bring him on the podcast and talk about this kind of stuff. So I did do recently a rebranding, and I used a lot of the pearls that I learned from Breakfast with Tony, such as, hiring fiber artists and even down to services you can use like PLAUD Note to take notes for when you have meetings. And, he literally listed probably 30 or 40 different pearls. And, he told me, just apply one at a time. But I came back to my team. I'm like, guys, we're doing all 20 of these. Like, let's go. And they got behind it. So it's really been great. I haven't worked with Tony 101. I just went to the course, but I'm definitely interested in the marketing mastery and continuing to get pearls like that to help elevate the brand.
I'm really glad you're getting into that PLAUD Note. That was an idea we got from Jacob Koch back on our original podcast. You guys all remember that? So that's what I've been using to do like our pre-podcast interviews. So I'm a little surprised you were taking such good notes, because that PLAUD Note will actually do that for you. You knew that, right?
I did. At the time you guys had talked about it, I just hadn't bitten the bullet yet. But when I heard it from Tony and then I heard it from you and from Jacob, okay, I got to buy this thing. So yeah, I was taking notes like old school with my, hand cramping and all that. But
with your hands? Oh my gosh, what a caveman.
I know, right? Yeah.
Anyway, Brian, did you have something you wanted to weigh in on there?
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, hell yeah about, quick actionable pearls. Love that. So I'm excited to hear some of those today. And also I just love, of course we're all friends here, and Chris has been a friend for a long time. And so when you described, implementing like all the pearls all at once, I was, no, I can't. That totally sounds unlike Chris. This is great. I love that about you, man. Of course you're, one of the things I think, Chris, you're so good at is just making changes, moving forward, boom, 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 boom. Something I admire about you that I've always respected, and you're a great example of that, man.
Thanks, Brian. It's definitely ready, fire, aim sometimes. I'm like, I'm already further down, and what did I do? But at least we get things in motion. So,
well, that's why we got somebody like Tony, right, to kind of help direct it. That's the whole point, is to have somebody who can direct that energy and help you implement what needs to be implemented first, second, third, right, and how to do it. So I love the energy, and I'm kind of the same way, of course.
Of course.
Absolutely. When people come back from the Master Marketing Academy or Breakfast with Tony, yeah, I would imagine it's pretty jarring for the staff when they get back and they just have all these ideas. That's definitely why it's good to, when you have a big list of things you want to implement, it's definitely good to bring in some type of consultant that can say the things that you wanted to say and implement the things you wanted to implement, but it's coming from them rather than coming from the boss man, that's going to stress them out even more.
Make someone else the bad guy, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
make you the bad guy.
The other way to look at it, I think, truly is, for some people, change is scary. For other people, change is exciting. Like Tony, it sounds like to you, change is exciting. To me, change is exciting. Chris, to you, change is exciting. Andy, I would say to you, change is exciting too. We all sort of like to experience novel things, right? But for a lot of people, we have to realize a lot of people, change is terrifying. And I think a lot of our employees the type of people that are going to be employed in an orthodontic office, taking risks is probably not up there for some people. We have to have somebody help us know what to do, how to make those changes so it's not terrifying. And so I think that's where, as the practice leader, it's kind of the idea like no one is a prophet in their own country, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. They see us, they see our flaws, they see our defects, they see where we've said this before. We've gotten excited before about something and it just fizzled out. So I think you almost need somebody, And there's no promotional aspect to this podcast in terms of Tony paying us or Leanne paying us. So this is just
we would accept their money, but no, we're not.
I mean,
we're not.
You could pay me to be here.
Donations are,
no one's getting paid to be here right now. Let's just get that out there. No financial interest of any sort.
And that's why we can have, these discussions and have real discussions. But I think no person's a prophet in their own country. So you almost need somebody who doesn't have the flaws, because your staff can see, okay, yeah, Teeters has gotten excited about this before, and whatever. Just give him 2 weeks, and the flame will be gone. Brian's done this before, and yeah, we've seen this. Andy, let's just kind of, you see what I'm saying? So I think it's almost necessary to get the wheels turning, because inertia is so hard to overcome. So damn hard.
You guys are baiting me for this personality stuff. I was going to save that for later, but just a quick comment on that. Of course, I get the same thing. We were just having the same conversation in my office, where my office manager was telling me that I can't be changing things so much. And, my response was, well, when people are coming to me with problems, I'm going to change something. So the day you stop complaining to me, I'm going to let it go. Of course, not that blunt, but I think that if we think back to what Neil Kravitz said at that first MKS meeting about the disc profile, we're all pretty familiar with that on a basic level. Most people fall into that S category, the stabilizers, and most of us who end up as entrepreneurs, we are very high, we're very prone to change, prone to novelty and excitement. But the majority of people who end up working a 9-to-5 job are going to be more the stabilizing type, the low risk category. So there is a little bit of tension there between that driving entrepreneurial spirit and then the people who actually have to come in and routinely implement these things. So I think that's going to be a challenge, a tension, so to speak, in most offices, maybe not all, but certainly the more entrepreneurial focused offices. Tony, I'd like to ask you, some of if you're willing to share some of the specific tips that you offered Chris when you went through this rebranding or this discussion, to your comfort level, whatever you're able to share with us.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to is there was a segment where I was sort of doing a rapid fire different technologies and tools that you can use during the process. And so one of them was like name licks. So let's say you're trying to rebrand and you need a new name for the practice. You can use AI now, and basically you give it a couple keywords, you give it the industry and the styling, and then how creative do you want it? And then it's just going to give you like a whole bunch of, hundreds if you want it, hundreds of different names of different styles that you want. And then it's also, as it gives you that name for the new practice, it's also going to give you like a mock logo for it that you don't have to use. You can just take the name. But it's really helpful, though, to see the different styling for the logo types that would potentially be associated with it. Is that how you come up with
Teeters Orthodontics? You use an AI to generate that?
I'm like, give me a last name that sounds like my last name, and it gave me Teeters Orthodontics.
Teeters, wow, you really nailed that one. I'm impressed. I hope you didn't pay a subscription for that ChatGPT, but anyway, Tony,
that one's free. And the other thing, there was a toggle on there as well, where it actually tell you like if that domain name is going to be available associated with that new name. So I thought that was really convenient for anybody out there looking to grow or wanting to rebrand. And then along with that, we talked about Fiverr. We talked about Arvin, which is a phone app that uses AI to generate. You can like upload your logo and basically want it to refresh it or just do a whole new logo. But there's just lots and lots of apps and tools out there. And I'm one of the biggest nerds you're going to meet when it comes to tech and gadgets. And so I was just sharing a bunch of those that would apply to marketing and branding.
I love the Kids Club too. Just to kind of talk about that is the idea of having a lanyard and putting some pins on there that the kids can earn every time they come in, because it gets them excited to come back. We've never done anything like that. Most everyone has a gift or something like that that they can give. But when you're interested in the child as a whole, not just necessarily their teeth, one of those 12 pins could be for good oral hygiene, but other things were like plant a tree or cook breakfast for mom and dad and things like that. So we're getting ready to roll it out, and I'm excited to give that a shot, because again, another idea I had from you, Tony, and we'll see how that goes.
That's a fun one. That definitely gets the kids engaged and looking forward to coming back for that next visit, just in case mom ever says, oh, honey, like you still have your baby teeth. We don't need to go to that observation appointment.
Exactly.
I want that kid to hold the mom accountable and say like, no, like I cooked you dinner. Like I want my pin, we got to go.
Just like Boy Scouts, right? You want that badge. That's what it's all about.
I heard one strategy that an orthodontist used was, or maybe it must have been an orthodontist. They would physically hand the kid $1 every time they came to their consult. And I don't remember if I heard that from Peniche or someone else. It was probably someone else. But what's your take on a strategy like that, Tony? Is that something you would recommend?
I wouldn't blatantly give them cash for showing up, but Dr. Anil Adikula was one of our clients, and we have a handful of out of our, we have like 600 clients, 150 of them or so are premium clients. Of those, we have a handful that are, I guess we would consider our more experimental and progressive offices, where if we have new ideas, we can go to them and pitch them, and they just trust us that like you've probably thought it through. There's a high likelihood that even though it's brand new, it's probably going to work. And so we can go to those offices and try different things. And with Anil Adikula, there was an idea to have him become the tooth fairy. So every time an observation patient lost a tooth, they could leave it under their pillow, and their parents, might give them a couple of bucks, but then, maybe leave a note for the tooth fairy saying like, don't take the tooth. I still need to bring it to, Dr. I. And then, they would bring it in, and then he would give them cash for that tooth.
That's cool.
And so that's sort of the same thing. I mean, you're showing up every time you're giving them sort of reward every time they show up. But it's not just for showing up. You're finding a different angle, a different
not
excuse.
A blatant payoff. Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I think the thing that's important there is it's based on relationship, right? It's based on relationship. It's not just, hey, you showed up, I'm going to give you money. It's, hey, I'm your tooth fairy, right? You're something to that person. You're something more than just the orthodontist. And, Chris, you had mentioned that there was the idea of having a lanyard and having a pin, and it's identifying things that transcend orthodontics or transcend dentistry. I think we're at a very interesting point in our culture and in the history of the world, really, where, we all are congregating here digitally. We're all in different states, hundreds of miles away, and yet we're connected, right? We're increasingly connected, and yet in some ways we're starving for, as you mentioned, Chris, to see somebody as a whole person. And so I personally think that, of course, these are business strategies. These are things to try and get people into your office. I understand that, like you want to be successful. But I think we have to stand back a little bit and say, well, why? Why do I want to be successful? Well, because I want to have a good life. Okay, what is a good life? Well, I think the more we can bring things that are meaningful into our work, where we recognize a kid as a whole kid, where we actually try and promote that kid to be a good human being, do good shit, like you mentioned, do something for your parents. Like you're helping to develop them in a way that's not just, hey, you're wearing your rubber bands. Well, congratulations. Like we're so segmented, and it's great. We're specialists. I understand there's a need for segmentation and specialization and everything. But I'm finding that in my life and in my practice, the more I can try and understand what do I really want out of this? Well, I want to have purpose. I want to have meaning. I want to have some semblance of joy in my life. And how do I do that? Well, I can start bringing things into my practice that are meaningful to me. And I think that's a great example of that. And it's meaningful for the kid too, hopefully. Hopefully the kid feels like, God, I'm being seen for this whole person. So I think that's fantastic. And, I think it's an interesting conundrum that we're in, because we're increasingly connected superficially. And yet we're always trying to fit more in, do more. For what? Well, I think sometimes we have to evaluate our motives and be like, we need to connect more deeply. And of course, that's one of the reasons why podcasts are becoming so popular, because we are having in-depth conversations. It's not a 2-minute infomercial. It's not a 2-minute discussion. It's like 60 minutes, 90 minutes deep dive. So anyway, just kind of an interesting observation. And I think it's brilliant to do that with your patients. And I think, the way that you guys did that with Anil, Tony, is really smart, because it establishes a relationship.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best
parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer, so be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
With several of our marketing programs that we put into our private client offices, they do involve trying to encourage young people to become better members of society and more well-rounded human beings. Yeah. So like some of the pins that Chris was talking about, like every office should do their own custom pins from scratch. Don't just buy something online. But like one of our offices, you can get a pin for getting straight A's on your report card. And then the next time you can earn one new pin at every visit, right? And then the next time you come in, maybe you learned how to cook and you cook dinner for your parents. So you get like a little chef's hat pin. Or maybe you volunteer at the animal shelter, for a few hours and you have a photo of that to sort of prove it. Just things that are outside of orthodontics. Like I don't think it's useful in a marketing perspective necessarily to just give out pins and rewards for, having good oral hygiene or no broken brackets. I feel like that's very self-serving, and also it's not motivating them to do anything on your behalf outside of the office. I want them out in the community doing things, and then all that positivity is sort of eventually credited back to you for being that influence, and making young people just better members and better, more well-rounded people.
To kind of validate that they've done that, do you just take their word for it? Like, oh yeah, I cook for mom and dad, or do you want them to bring the doctor a picture of them in action? Or how do you verify?
Most things you want them to prove it, either with a photo or ideally like a social media post where they tag you, but they still have to like come in and like pull up their phone and show you that they posted it. So that way, if they forgot to tag you, you can say like, oh, can you click edit and add that tag really quick?
Perfect.
But,
trust but verify, Chris.
Trust but verify.
But also like the fact that they're taking the photo, and then ideally if they're posting it as they do it, they're thinking about you, they're talking about you, they're crediting you. And so it brings it back to you, and it makes them more engaged with you rather than just doing it for themselves. I sort of want them to do it sort of for you. And that way you're credited socially.
Well, and it's still like it's connecting you. It's like it's deepening the relationship between you. It's more meaningful. Honestly, it really is. And interesting thought is, one of my practices is in an area with, higher SES and probably more kids in private school and that type of thing. Speaking of custom pins, I might have a custom pin that says, if you've been a straight A student and you got a C for the first time and you actually tried, you took a hard class that you might not ace and you took a risk and you got a C, congratulations, son. Like, honestly, like in some ways we need more of that, not just the A's, right? Because those A's are neurotic. I mean, I was that way to some degree. It's like, I always need to get an A, right? It's like,
Brian, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying we need more consolation trophies, more
No. I'm saying
awards?
No, I'm saying someone who's already the perfectionist, who's got this burden on their back that always gets straight A's, but they're playing it safe. So they're taking the easy classes so they don't mar their perfection, right? Hey, if you take a hard class and you end up not doing well, I'm going to give you a pin, a C pin, C+. You got a C+.
What if you take the hard class and you do end up doing well? Is that, no pin for you?
There's no reward. They've already gotten the reward. They've already gotten the reward. They got the A+.
I think your idea, I'm doing the consultant thing now. I think your idea actually might work better outside of the educational realm, as in like get it away from report cards, but apply it towards, maybe you call it the learning the hard way. pin.
Yeah.
And so maybe they tried something.
Yeah.
They tried a sport, or they tried something and it failed, but they failed forward.
You know, they learned
something forward pin.
Yeah. Falling upward is it's sometimes said. Yeah. Of course, I'm joking about the C, but like I'm serious about the idea. Like I think there needs to be more of that because it's like we're always trying to encourage people to be so good. Like that's the common message. Be good. Be the best you can. What about the people that are already neurotically that way? They actually need to like tone it down a little bit. They need to play it. They need to risk not being perfect.
Yes.
They need to risk not being perfect. And
it sounds like you're referencing a lot of mindset, Carol Dweck ideas with the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is going to be attracted to skills that they've already mastered, or they it's an easy shot. Whereas a growth mindset individual is going to push themselves beyond their comfort zone, even if that means failing, and ideally failing upwards. But you're never going to grow if you stick to things that you're gonna ace every time. And yeah, you're right. That's not really incentivized or rewarded enough in our culture, at least not directly. So I think that's a really interesting. Maybe it's like a comfort zone pin or something like that. I don't know, but
that's a good idea. Make it more broad, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Tony, with this same program, I think this is fascinating to me. Boots on the ground, how do you implement this in your office? Like, do you have a menu? Like, how do you present this to your patients, I guess? And is there some sort of structure to it? Obviously, you have these pins set ahead of time. How is that presented, and how is that followed through on?
The steps that I would recommend is when they come in for the first appointment, you give them their, you welcome to them practice. And you're basically like implying that they're 100% going to start with you. You kind of act like you're already in that relationship. You give them their lanyard, but you also want to give them a membership ID card, ideally like a plastic ID card that clips to the lanyard. And we actually have a lot of offices now buying ID card printers. They're about $800 to $900 on Amazon. So it's a bit of an investment, but it's worth it because you can now put the photo of the patient on there and type in their name and then print it out. And it just looks like an FBI ID badge or something. And it looks really cool, and they feel really cool. And then along with that, then you give them their first pin. It's probably just your logo or something like that, or a tooth pin, but something simple just to get them started. And then of course, a postcard that's going to look almost like a restaurant menu. That's going to have the different types of pins that they can earn, sort of a reminder that they can earn one new pin at every visit. Here's the different 12 pins that you can earn, and maybe a couple bullet points of how they have to, some details they have to follow in order to actually earn that pin properly. And then finally, like the bottom, like some fine print, basically saying like, please take a photo and post it, or at least take a photo and show us to prove that you did it, so that way you can earn your pin. That's how I would launch it. But the ID card printer, I think, is an element of secret sauce here that if you want to take your kids club to that next level, spend the $800 or $900, get that ID card printer, put that kid's photo on there, and watch them light up with excitement.
Yeah.
That's kind of like one of those things where I drove past this business this past week and with my girlfriend, and I was commenting to her, this business isn't going to succeed because they've bought something that they can barely afford, and they're promoting it in a way that is cheap, and it looks cheap, and that it's cheap. And so it's not going to attract people. And so you can kind of just see the writing on the wall, like it's going to fail. And so it's that same kind of scenario that I think in this sort of instance, like if you want to succeed, you kind of got to like be invested in it, right? It sounds like, Tony, like you're saying like don't do it, half-assed, but like invest the money in it, make it look legit, kind of take a little hit, and that's going to help things take off.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're spending $800 or $900 on that printer, but if you can just reduce your attrition rate by one patient, for that year, you just paid for it. And we all know that the attrition rate for OBS patients is irritating. So we want to be able to keep them without them disappearing.
We can't be stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, I think is what that comes down to. And I can relate to that. I think we all can. We're all entrepreneurs in some sense. I can relate to that in my practice, in those lean years in the startup when, to be honest, like Chris and I, we're in Phoenix. It's not a guarantee that you're going to make it out here. Like a lot of areas, it's just taken for granted that you're going to grow to 1 million just by hanging a shingle. But in some of these metropolitan areas, it's, people actually do go out of business. So that's scary when you're so invested already, and now you have to put even more money into these, sort of spaghetti to the wall marketing ideas, throw the spaghetti at the wall, see if it sticks. And it doesn't always stick. I've spent thousands on things that just got zero ROI. And that's really scary when you've only got a few $1,000s in the bank account, or you're signing over your associate checks to pay your payroll. So, but on the other hand, you do have to be prepared to take that leap. Otherwise, it is going to come off as cheap, and you're never going to make it to the place where you want to be. I would like to segue that a little bit because, we've all started businesses, not just our practices, but, the Orthodontic Pearls meeting, MOPC. I think of you, Tony, as sort of a serial entrepreneur. You're always jumping from one new project to the next. You shared some of those with me, which were fascinating. Tell us about your experience as an entrepreneur and maybe some of your favorite businesses that you've started and what you've learned along the way through that journey.
I have a habit of just pursuing whatever I'm interested in, whatever my passions are, to a degree that most people haven't seen before. I get interested in something and I just go all in, and I have, all the information I could ever want on my phone. I have access to the internet, and that means I can learn anything, especially with the University of YouTube. Everything is on there.
Or ChatGPT
so I tend,
now.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it even faster. So yeah, I'll find something I'm passionate about and just go down that path. And then I have this silly habit of developing businesses out of my passions. And half the time it's never intentional. It just happens. I guess a funny one or an interesting one was Time and Oak, right? So that was the whiskey element. So I invented a product where you could barrel age basically cheap whiskeys by an additional 8 to 12 years in just 24 hours. So basically I was kind of a whiskey snob at the time. I was at the liquor store and I'm just like wondering, what's really the difference between like top shelf whiskeys and like well whiskeys? And then I have a lucid imagination. So like I could see and feel everything when I thought of this, and it all just clicked. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, wine, if you put wine in a glass bottle, it's going to continue to age and change over time. But if you put spirits like whiskey or vodka or rum, anything like that in a glass bottle, it's going to taste exactly the same 10 years from now. So it really has nothing to do with age. It has to do with the interaction with the wood. And I was aware that, after 8 years, whiskey's only penetrated the wood barrel by like a 1/16 of an inch after all that time. And the reason why is because it's going against the grain. So it's a watertight receptacle. And I figured out that if I use lasers and I notch it open, the wood, we can take advantage of capillary action, basically do accelerated transpiration through capillary action. So all the liquid is flowing through that piece of wood really efficiently. And by using lasers, we can keep the capillaries dilated. And so it's just really fast. Anyways, and I basically had this idea in the liquor store in a matter of seconds. And then I went home for like a month and whiteboarded it with a couple of my friends, and then immediately filed for the patents, and then launched the company about a year later. And by engineering a viral marketing campaign, we'd already raised a bunch of money for the launch. But we realized we could use Kickstarter, not necessarily for the money, but for the viral element of it, if it was done properly. And it worked. It went worldwide viral. We were just about in every magazine, every blog you can think of. There's even a spread in Playboy with my clothes on. Don't worry about the whiskey element.
I think Brian reads that, right, Brian?
Oh my gosh!
For the articles, of course.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, great writers.
Of course, obviously.
So that was just an example of again me just sort of following my passions, coming up with an idea, and then building a business on it, and then of course selling it as soon as it starts to get too big. I'm going to be very blunt. I'm not an operator. I'm not somebody that wants to run a company day to day, and especially not somebody that wants to run a company long term. I want to build things for ideally just a couple, like 1 to 3 years is kind of like the sweet spot for me. And then definitely by year 3, I want to get acquired and then be able to work on the next thing, because I probably have 100 in my Rolodex or my to-do list that I want to do. I only allow myself 3 businesses at a time.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best
parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
There's a couple of points you mentioned there, Tony. And first of all, I feel like we kind of glossed right over a big part of that product development phase. So, I mean, like you mentioned, you're Googling things and learning, but I know that you're also a very strong networker. And first question, did you come up with that entire idea all by yourself? Or if not, how did you use your network to flush out this proof of concept, first of all, and then actually making it into reality? I mean, you said yourself, you're not necessarily an operator, so you have to, find someone to actually get this thing manufactured, product development. Tell us about your network and how that played into this company development.
So the only way to explain it is to explain one of the other companies. So simultaneously, I had created a company called NXT Industries, and you can think of it as like WeWork or like a business incubator. And so we had 2 buildings in Portland. At any given time, we had about 65 small businesses under our roofs. And I ran that for 4 years. So we had several hundred businesses come through there. But I curated it myself. So I made sure that we had just the right amount of graphic designers, video editors, robotics companies, like basically just everything you can think of. And so a one-man business was able to operate a lot like a 20-man business by leveraging the other talents and skill sets in the space. And so a lot of great businesses came out of there, and they're doing well today. But because I was the centerpiece, it was my office and I was the one curating it. And so because I was the centerpiece, I got to be the centerpiece. Like every entrepreneur is a hustler. Every entrepreneur is a go-getter, and they all have their own networks. And so for me to be the centerpiece amongst like basically hundreds of businesses, it really expanded my network rapidly. And so anything I can possibly think of that I wanted to do, I probably knew someone that can help me make it happen. And so when I had this idea, as far as the product goes, as far as like idea and patents and all that, that was just 100% me. I would definitely bounce ideas off my friends and do some whiteboarding. But then when it came to building the business, I brought in like Austin Bogart and Sean Mendiola to help with logo and brand development, websites, and all those assets. And then I brought in a couple people to do some videos. I did all the photography, all the product photography, and brand photography myself. I'm also a photographer. And then, and that's what it was. So because I was the centerpiece and I had this like network, I got really lucky early on where there were some different investors that came into the office to meet with other businesses. But I guess a couple of them saw me in the conference room having a big creative session with some people. And the investors told the person that they were working with, they said, "Is that Tony Peniche?" And they're like, "Yeah." They're like, "Would you please send him a message saying that the next time he wants to launch another company or has another invention, have him come to me first. I want to invest in whatever he does next." So when I had this idea, it was really easy. I just made one phone call and was able to raise a bunch of money to build out this company and get it going from day one. And that was only possible because of the network and those relationships that I had built.
So I'm curious too, like Andy, a similar thing, because I've had some ideas like, okay, I think this would be a great thing here, orthodontic or not orthodontic related, right? And I was talking to a buddy last week actually about some Kickstarter ideas, and I just don't have that much experience doing this, right? So I'm curious, is that something that you raise capital first and then you hire an engineer and an engineer develops a prototype and then you launch a Kickstarter? Or do you just launch a Kickstarter with hey, this is my idea. I believe it's possible and I need money to hire an engineer and produce the thing. How did you do it? How do you recommend to do it if people have ideas out there that they think are viable, that they think would actually, fill a niche, so to speak? Mm-hmm. What do you suggest?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that it's used. Its core is supposed to be that you have an idea and you're good at presenting that idea, and you need all these backers to pledge a certain amount of money in order for you to finish the prototyping and actually bring it to market. That's sort of, to help you get it off the ground. That's the intent of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and there's a few others. But these days, it seems to be used as just a new product launch platform. So I'm working with a few different companies right now, a few different sponsors for the survival games that we do, and they were telling me that they've done like over 20 or over 30 different Kickstarters, and I'm like, why? And they're like, well, every time we launch a new product, it's just a great way to introduce it to the world. Mm-hmm. It's just the best commercial, basically, and we can just. And then after you do a campaign, you get the database of everyone that backed you and everyone else that signed up for the newsletter. And so every time you launch a new product, you can just email that database again and say, like, I know you like the first one, you're probably going to like this too. But there always needs to be a tone of, we need your help, we need your support. We're a small business or we're a startup. But I've heard a few times where large companies come in there and they pretend to be very small companies and they launch a new product, which is a little bit unfortunate because, their video and photography production value is so much greater. They have better editors, better branding, just because they're paying top talent on all fronts. But yeah, it is supposed to be for smaller businesses. And there are some tactics too. So we did a strategy called front loading. So the idea is, if you hit your big goal on Kickstarter, let's say your goal is $20,000. That's how much money you're trying to raise. So that way you can pay for the tooling for the factory or first round of inventory, whatever it is. You're trying to raise $20,000. That's a good goal. It's not going to go well if you're only trying to raise like $2,500 or really anything less than 10 grand. It's just not really that impressive from their perspective. But let's say your goal is $20,000. If you can hit that $20,000 in the first day, you're going to end up on the front page of Kickstarter as one of their trending campaigns or editor's choice or one of those categories. But you'll end up on the front page, and there's a high likelihood that more people are going to see you and has the potential of going viral at that point. So we engineered front loading. So we had a series of parties in Portland. The first party maybe had like 30 people there, and they were all the heavy influencers of the city. We had them all there. We showed them the product. We let them do blind taste testing, like before and afters and all that. So, they're really wowed by the product. But we told everyone straight up, we said, look, we're going to launch this thing October 6th at 6 a.m. If you plan on backing us and buying one of the products or pledging some money, do it on the first day, ideally in the first few hours. Don't do it on day 2. Don't do it on 3. That doesn't help us. If you want to help us and you want to support us, do it on day 1 and help us hit that goal of $20,000 in the first day. And then after that party, and everybody was jealous, the community was sort of like jealous that they didn't get to come. Then we opened it up. We had about 400 people come to the next party 2 weeks later. Because everybody wanted to go where the influencers had been and see what they saw. And we told them the exact same speech, October 6th, 6 a.m. We're trying to hit our goal within the first 24 hours. If you want to support us, do it then. Don't do it on day 2 or day 3. And it worked. We were able to raise, for us, we were able to raise our $20,000 in the first 24 hours. And then we ended up on the front page of Kickstarter. Outside of that, though, we also were in talks for months beforehand. We were in talks with at least 30 different press outlets. So different magazines, different editors. We sent them press kits. We sent them the product, explained what we were doing, said the same thing, though, said, if you're going to write an article on this topic or this product, please have it published. Please publish it on October 6th. We're trying to make this thing go viral, and we're trying to hit our goal within the first 24 hours. And you publishing on that day would be very helpful. And a handful of them agreed. And then, of course, October 6th, 6 a.m., it just exploded right out the gates between the press and also raising all this money and all this interest on day one. And then we ended up raising almost $200,000 in 30 days.
Wow. It's amazing.
Now that money, Tony, when someone, I haven't used Kickstarter much at all, if at all. When someone invests in Kickstarter, are they becoming an actual investor in the company? Is it a loan? Are they buying the initial round of product? Tell us what strings are attached to that money, and are there rules on how it can be used? Or is it just a free-for-all? Could that open someone up to get scammed? If I did a Kickstarter and then I end up just, spending that on a renovation for my house, is there any repercussion for that? What are the guardrails here, and what are the strings that are attached to that funding?
You can think of it, I think the easiest way to think of it is it's a pre-order, and usually it's a pre-order for a prototype. So you don't, so for the most part, if it's a small startup with a new product, it's probably going to be a while before you get it. They're usually raising the money for tooling or something like that. So it might be 4 to 6 months before you actually get the product. And if that group spends the money wrong and they're able to deliver the product to you, it sucks for you. There's not really any strings attached to that. So you are taking a risk that you may never get the product. I know the Coolest Cooler, had set the record for a long time. I think they raised like $10 million on the platform, and then they never delivered the coolers because they couldn't. Wow. They ended up spending all the money on like nonsense and the wrong tooling, and had to start over again and again. And I think he was listed as like, the Darwin Awards.
Yeah.
Where it's like the weirdest, wildest way people die. Yeah.
Right.
There's something else for like CEOs, and he was like unfortunately named like the worst CEO of like 2016 or something like that.
Well, so what incentive does someone have to invest in Kickstarter? Is there like a discount on the product or?
So I got this sweet T-shirt, bro. How else do you think I got this?
Yeah, Echoverse did a Kickstarter thing, right?
It literally was a Kickstarter.
Yeah. I
got an album. I could dedicate a song to my wife, looking for brownie points there, for whatever. It's pretty amazing.
It usually you are getting a discounted price on what the eventual retail price will be. So you are getting a better price, but you're also getting something that doesn't exist on this planet yet.
Yeah.
You're getting something brand new that no one else has access to. So you're like an early adopter of whatever it is. Like an example, we talked about PLAUD earlier, right? Mm-hmm. I had literally just done a lecture at the Nexus meeting. And I was on stage talking about how I'm a total gadget guy, which I absolutely am. I've got all the gadgets. I'm a big nerd like that. And after doing a lecture and talking about that, I literally get off stage and I'm like just scrolling, through social media. And all of a sudden PLAUD was still on Indiegogo. They hadn't even launched yet. Indiegogo is just like Kickstarter. And of course, like all the algorithms know that I'm interested in gadgets and tech. And so I saw that and like had just gotten off stage and I'm like talking about being a gadget guy. And I'm like, speaking of gadgets, purchase, and then like 2 months later, they finished their tooling and it arrived. And so I was one of the early adopters of that technology.
This podcast brought to you by PLAUD.ai.
Right? Yeah.
No, I think we're all huge fans of the PLAUD, the gadgets. Fascinating stuff. How this stuff, how it all works. Tony, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to come back to, which is that you are not an operator. You are an entrepreneur. You like to start the companies, give it about 1 to 3 years, and then basically flip it to someone who can take the ball and run with it. I think that is part of a bigger principle, which is know thyself, and something that, again, here we go with the personalities. I think that, when you study things like MBTI, Colby Index, DISC, whatever, you start to learn a little bit about yourself and the chemistry of who you need to surround yourself with in order to have successful ventures. So I want to talk a little bit about Tony as the person. And you shared a little bit of your personality typing with me. You said, Myers-Briggs, you said you were an ENTJ, which fits just perfectly there. For those of you who don't know, ENTJ is the commander. So that stands for an extroverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging personality type. Tony and I are off by one letter, and it's that last one, that J versus the P. So what I jokingly said is that Tony and I are both good at coming up with ideas, but whereas he will actually follow through and implement them, for me, just having the idea is good enough, and it's time to go do something else. Let's dive into that a little bit, Tony. Tell us how that has served you and how you have come to know yourself and learned to surround yourself with the right resources and people to harmonize with that.
I mean, I assume that everyone does it like this, but I learned the hard way. I've never been afraid of trying. I've never been afraid to potentially fail. Now, if I know I'm going to fail, then of course I'm not going to do it. Why, But if it's just simply one of the many options and there's a chance of success, then I have no problem like going after something. And if I do fail, hopefully I learn from it and I fail forward. But so I basically learned the hard way, and then slowly over time realized that all the advice that my mother had given me was correct, by not listening and then just trying something and then learning that doesn't work out. Yeah, I used to take on way too many projects at the same time. And then I realized I'm like, wow, every single project actually needs a lot more attention than what I'm giving it. So I got to stop doing that. Or trying to make all of your best friends equity holders in the startup. And then you realize you're like, wow, I love that friend, but they're not great at that position. Or, they were only excited for the first 6 months and now they're just totally, not even involved anymore. And yet they have 25% of the company. What was I thinking? My mom told me not to do that. Little by little, company by company, or project by project. I've learned, where I'm strong and where I need to assemble a team. I think one of the interesting things is I think sometimes people look at the, visionary personalities or commander personalities. And I think a lot of people think that's a goal, they need to become that personality type or that's the best one. And it's just no, it's not. That's just one. That's just for a football team to be successful, you only have one quarterback out there. There's a lot of positions. And if any one of them go down, the whole team goes down. And so I have to remind people every now and then when I bring them on board, sometimes they're like, well, I'm just a numbers guy, right? Or they're like, I'm not good at seeing the big picture. I'm really focused on the little minute details, and I can get lost in that. And they say it kind of apologetically, and I'm like, don't apologize for that. I need that. You understand that I suck at that. We are a team. We're assembling a team. Yes, I have my position, and I'm probably going to be the visionary, and I'm going to be the one leading us forward. But we won't get there unless you are just as strong as I am in your position as I am in my position.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer, so be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
I think that the older I get, the more I realize how everyone plays a role, like how everything actually balances out and how necessary balance is. I mean, it's like in our daily grind, like there's a night and there's a day, right? There's a time to rest. There's a time to exert yourself. There's a time to calm down. There's a time to like be, pushing, right? And to experience stress. Like our body is made for that. And so somehow erroneously we think, like you mentioned, Tony, I think it's a very mindful observation that when we get in our ego, we somehow start judging that, or we somehow start thinking that, well, we should be this because I'm perceiving this as good and I'm seeing my deficiency in that area. So therefore I want to be that, rather than just being like, listen, and not to get political, but I see the need for conservatives to conserve whatever principles. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's some wisdom there somewhere, even if it's outdated. I also see the need for liberals, like, hey, this is antiquated, this is outdated. Let's push, let's move. And so unless you can appreciate that, if you think that your side is right, you won't be balanced. You're not going to have the whole truth. And if you're building a company, if you're trying to build a great group, as you mentioned, you have to have the different personalities. In fact, if you fill it with your best friends or people that are just like you, it's going to probably suck to some degree if you want to scale it and make it bigger than just this, flash that poof. But if you want something sustainable, you better have balance, man. And, I'm coming to appreciate that more and more. Like even people I don't like, I had this experience, that I met this guy and I spent some time with him and I kind of thought, this guy's just kind of rubbing me the wrong way, man. He just kind of bugs me. And then I was showering that night and I was just, it often comes when you're not thinking about anything in particular. I thought, even though he kind of drives me nuts, there's a place for him. There's a place for it. Like when stuff starts to go off the rails, that kind of guy is gonna be like, hey, hold on. Let's reel it back in here. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I need that kind of a guy, right? And Andy and Chris and I are, similar enough that we understand, like, we need those people on our teams. And so I think that's just really mature. And I mean, obviously you've got enough life experience to know that, and like you said, I mean, essentially experience is the best teacher. But I just want to put that out there. I think that I see in our country, I see, such division. And it's like, I get being passionate about stuff. I'm passionate about stuff. I've got strong opinions on certain things, but you can't view your opinion as right. Yeah. There's a need for the other opinion. There's a need for it. Because in the end, there's a reason for that opinion, and there's validity there somewhere. And so you have to find, well, what's the balance, right? And so that's in building a network, a team, a company, whatever. That's the process of finding what the balance is, so it's sustainable and can continue producing, right, and not just fizzle out.
We're in the process right now of bringing on 2 new people to the management team for the survival games. And literally just this week, I was explaining to one of them how myself and my co-founder, Phil, how we couldn't be more opposite. He's like one of my best friends, but we couldn't be more opposite when it comes to just the way we think. I'm definitely the optimist. I'm definitely the big vision guy. And Phil is more pragmatic. Some would say pessimistic. And so when I have a big idea,
we don't have anyone like that, right, guys?
No one in this group.
Andy's also very optimistic.
That's Andy. Extremely optimistic.
Overly optimistic. I'm constantly. These guys are constantly having to talk me off the ledge with all my harebrained ideas.
Yeah. And that's what you need.
I'm very much the cynic in the group. I didn't mean to interrupt, Tony. Please continue.
No, and that's a good point. Like, you need those. And that's what I was explaining to this new guy, is that, like, yes, you're going to see Phil and I arguing a lot. And I want that. I need that.
Yes,
exactly.
Like it doesn't mean I'm going to cave,
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's going to make me think about it a little bit more.
100%.
And so I'm like, if there's something that I'm doing and it sounds like I might be taking us in the wrong direction, or it's not physically possible to pull off that stunt, whatever it is, like, argue with me on it and force me to think through it. Yes. And then at the end, I'll probably decide, like, oh, you're right. Like, that's not going to work out the way I thought it would, or it is going to work. Suck it up. Shut up. We're moving forward. But I want that. I want to argue. Yes. I want not necessarily argue, but I want to debate. and I want to be challenged. Don't trust me. Otherwise, don't just trust me blindly, because that's not useful.
Yeah. I think that's really an evolved way of thinking, because so much in our culture, if you don't agree with me, I don't like you. And that is the absolute worst thing ever. We need those polar opposites, and we crave that. And Andy's really good at that. He, as a debater, will come out strong about something we're excited about, and he'll always show the opposite side of it so we can consider that. And that helps open our mind up. So I love that you feel the same way and think the same way, Tony. I think that's really an evolved way of thinking, and the way we need to think about things is, just because I don't agree with you, let's consider your opinion. And I like you just the same. In fact, more, because you're helping stimulate my mind on where we can go with this.
Here's an important element, I think, for this to work, where it's actually productive and not toxic. There has to be mutual respect. And there has to be, where you're in the argument, like Tony, as you mentioned, where you each appreciate that there's another viewpoint, and you actually welcome the discord, so to speak. And I've gotten so much more comfortable in my life with that, because I realize I'm seeking wholeness here. I'm seeking to be whole. I'm seeking to see things as they are. And that includes the shadow and the light. And I might assign shadow to something that you assign light to. It doesn't matter. It's just another side. But there has to be mutual respect. If it's ego-based and it's arguing, and the goal is to be right, and the goal is to make the other person wrong, that's toxic. That's insanity. But what you're describing, and I think what, Chris and Andy and I feel like we have together is where there's mutual respect, where you actually welcome the opposing viewpoint, because it's not mine. I'm limited. I have a viewpoint, which means I have a point from a view, which means it is limited. It's like, I may have said this before. I can't remember in a podcast. Andy, forgive me. I might have said it in the last one. But it's like, if I'm looking at the statue of David, I know I haven't done it in this one. If I'm looking at the statue of David from an angle, and I don't know that it's a 3D thing, and I'm told this is the statue of David. Someone else is looking at the statue of David from a different angle. They're told, this is the statue of David. We could argue all day long about, no, that's not what it looks like. This is what it looks like. You're way wrong. It looks like this. And the reality is, we're just seeing it from a different angle. They're both valid. And guess what? One of them is not complete, not even close to complete, because there's a full 360 degrees of angles there. Imagine. So it's like you want someone to tell you it's different, because it actually is different in some way. Yeah. And to have the arrogance to think, no, I can see the whole thing. We're so narcissistic in some ways, and we all do it. I just think to break out of that, like you said, Chris, it's an evolved way of thinking, and a lot of it's experience, as Tony mentioned. It's like you realize that, God, I'm kind of nothing. I rely on other people. I need other people.
I think it's a good pearl for orthodontists to take away from this conversation right there is, we always encourage our clients to build up their office manager, to basically run the whole office, but also be the commander. That way it takes that pressure off of the doctor. Yes. But you have to, as the doctor and the owner of the practice, you have to be willing to empower and enable your office manager to argue with you. You can have a code word where if it's like it's going to get hot, like let's just go talk in private, not in front of the team. But you can't make the office manager, you can't shut down the office manager when they push back, because then they're not going to have the courage to talk back again in the future. You have to understand the negative side effects of shutting them down, just because your ego is saying I'm always right. This is my practice. This is what I want.
Yeah. I think the way I've always thought about that, when I was not an office manager, but it was a leader in my office. And if we're going personality types, she would be a very strong ESTJ, which is similar to an ENTJ in that they're both, natural leaders and very directing, they're good at putting people in the right spots. But an S versus an N is going to be a little bit more literal, a little bit more by the book, more averse to change, but very traditional, upholding very strict rules. And what in office characters, this would be Dwight Schrute. Okay. So, you know that type. And we had discussions over this where she had a very difficult time admitting that she was wrong in something. And I would talk to her and say, look, is it more important for you to win the argument, or is it more important for you to actually have the correct outcome here? Because those are two very different things. And you have to be able to set your ego aside and recognize, like Brian was saying, I'm only seeing one angle of the Statue of David. And we all know which angle that was for Brian, but
there it is. I knew it was coming.
But anyway, thank you all. It's been a great night.
The chiseled jaw. I was looking at the profile, of course. What were you suggesting?
Anyway, so yeah, is it more important for you to win the argument, or is it more important for you to come to the correct outcome? And that does involve putting our egos aside and taking other feedback and ultimately making a decision, but making one that is more balanced outside of our own head, I believe. One other thing that I wanted to talk to with Tony, and this involves another business that is very specific to Oregon. Okay. And I know this is a topic that is somewhat controversial, but it is getting a lot of spotlight lately. And that is psilocybin and the idea of this sort of drug therapy. So now, Tony, you live in Oregon. And I understand that you have actually started a company that is one of the pioneers in this space. So would you tell us a little bit about your experience here? Why did you start that company? And tell us how it's going so far.
I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you the backstory. But so the company is called Immersive Therapies. And psilocybin mushrooms have been used, magic mushrooms for some of you out there, have been used for thousands of years. And it has a lot of benefits. And basically, on a therapeutic side, it actually has really phenomenal outcomes. And so the state of Oregon has legalized psilocybin to be used in therapeutic settings. Under the guidance of a certified therapist that's been trained in this type of medicine. And what happens is people with PTSD or depression or anxiety or addiction issues that have already tried other types of therapy or medications and things just aren't working. Maybe they've been struggling with this for 10, 12 years and nothing has worked. They can now come to Oregon, come to Immersive Therapies, meet with one of our therapists. There's 2 rounds. It takes a few days to get into the queue, just because everything is so heavily monitored and regulated and controlled, which is good. And so there's multiple rounds of onboarding, making sure that they're the right type of person, making sure that they don't have any other issues that they're bringing to the table, figuring out what it is they're trying to fix or work on. If we're going to help them sort of rewire their brain and get past this issue. And then when they finally do come in, it's a very beautiful office. It's 10,000 square feet. So technically we're the largest psilocybin therapy clinic in the world. And it's a beautiful setting. There's a nice comfortable bed. There's a blindfold that you can wear and sound canceling headphones if you want. And then the therapist just sits there in the room with you and takes notes. But so you come in, you drink this psilocybin tea, and then you're basically going to be on a really, really strong trip for the next 6 hours. And usually about 6 to 7 hours that the session lasts. And as you're going through that, the therapist is making sure that whatever it is that you were trying to fix, let's say it's PTSD or a family member had passed away, and there's something about it that has really, really messed you up. We want to make sure that that's on the front of your mind. So as the psilocybin kicks in, you're forced to face it. Basically, all the skeletons in your closet are going to come to the front. And there's also actually a chemical in your brain that's responsible for ego. And it turns out psilocybin neutralizes that. And so whatever ego you had that was able to sort of build up those walls and help you compartmentalize your mind to keep things, out of sight, out of mind, that all comes right down once you have that psilocybin in your system. And so all those thoughts that you've been trying to avoid come right to the forefront. And if you take a CT scan of somebody's brain, and have them think about a certain topic or a certain memory, you can sort of like map the neural pathways that it's taking when they're thinking. You think of like a consciousness and then a memory and then that neural pathway that it takes every single time. Well, that path might be triggering all kinds of trauma because there's other memories or other things associated with it. But it's a very specific neural pathway from consciousness to memory. And then what happens on psilocybin, a very strong dose especially, is like the whole brain lights up. So in order to think about that, you're activating everything. And it's really powerful. It's really wild to see it, which is why you have all the visuals and hallucinations and all that stuff along the way. But when it's over, basically 6 hours later, you can give them another scan. And now when they think about that memory, you can see that the neural pathway is completely different. And it's no longer on a neural pathway route that is triggering those same traumas as before. So you still remember everything. You just don't feel that depression or that anxiety or that PTSD that you once did every time you thought about this memory. So we're literally rewiring people's brains using psilocybin. And right now, I think we have like a 92% success rate. So people that come in, they only come in once. So as far as a business standpoint, it's not great because we don't have any repeat. We don't have a lot of repeat customers. Yeah. But there's millions of people out there that are dealing with their own battles. And if nothing else has worked, then it's definitely a good tool to use. This is not recreational. This is not for fun. This is not silly or irresponsible. This is medicine, and we're literally changing people's lives, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's impressive. My original degree was going to be in psychology. I was going for a PhD, and I had the chance to kind of work as a therapist. And the thing that troubled me is a lot of times I was the fifth therapist that person had been seeing, and they've been in therapy for 40 years, which, like you said, is a great business model, but is it actually changing the person? And it's not to discount therapy. I think it's wonderful, and I think a lot of people do get some groundbreaking things, and everyone should do it. But what about those patients that are in it for 40 years that just aren't breaking through, where you're saying you could break through in one? And I've had friends who have done magic mushrooms and said it felt like they got 20 years of therapy in 4 hours. It's incredidible. So, yeah.
Well, so I think the goal, so I'm a strong advocate of this type of stuff. I've actually done some ketamine therapy, a similar thing. And I've read some, PubMed research, on psilocybin, just different, alternative medicine. And, of course, I think it has to be done responsibly, and it should be done with a professional, and you need to have someone who's experienced, because it's not recreational. If you actually want to get better, the goal here is transformation. And you described, Tony, you're literally transforming the way that you view something. The memory's still there, but you're transforming how you see it. And I think that's the goal really in our lives, is to, you talked about falling forward. I mentioned falling upward. I think the goal is to transform the way we view things. And so we talked about opposing viewpoints. Rather than that being an ego threat, it's greater knowledge and truth. It's a different perspective. Wow, I love having more perspectives than just one. I mean, isn't it great? And like when you're in a partnership, a companionship, a marriage, whatever, it's like the goal is to transform two people into one entity where, hey, now I've got your perspective and mine. God, the world's better. I know more I'm more connected to the world, right? So I think it's a great thing because, and Chris, you mentioned, I think, and therapy is wonderful. I go to a therapist and I'm, grateful, but I think medicine alone doesn't seem to be enough often. And therapy alone doesn't seem to be enough often. Why? Well, because medicine is just changing the chemicals, but it's not transforming the pathway. It's not changing the way that you view the thing, really. I mean, maybe to some degree. And therapy alone is a lot of talking about the thing, but God, how do you get past it? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And so I think you combine those two and it's like, okay, yeah, now I know what it's like to not be threatened by failure or to a degree that I didn't know before. I mean, we all know this to some degree, right? And we learn it to some degree. But I think a lot of the truly enlightened people over time have had these experiences, whether it's with plant medicine or whether it's sometimes we can get there with music. I certainly have, just listening to music, or you have something is hitting your brain that allows you to transform the way you see it, and how you see it affects everything. I mean, it affects everything. So I think it's super cool that you're doing it. And, of course, I'm an advocate for people looking into it, doing it responsibly, whatever they're wanting to do.
What I want to touch on there, Brian, is you mentioned, how both you and Chris mentioned how traditional therapy can sometimes just drag on for years and years. And, I had this thought about certain, not all, but certain self-help procedures and how oftentimes they don't work. And I think in this light of those pathways that our minds take when we think about certain topics, I think that the wrong type of self-help can sort of reinforce those pathways as opposed to rewire them. Now, good therapy, and I'll reference, cognitive behavioral therapy specifically. That is a way of, talking yourself through a sort of rewiring, looking at the situation, analyzing the way you perceive a situation or a topic, and recognizing logically what is wrong about that, where are you making a connection that shouldn't be there, and then through practice and reinforcement, rewiring that, so to speak. It sounds like something like magic mushrooms can do that automatically. But my question for you, Tony, is how do you ensure that that new pathway is a better one? In theory, could that be rewired even worse? And is that at all related to these stories we hear about people becoming psychotic after undergoing something like this? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So to ensure that, you don't have negative results that you weren't anticipating, that's what the onboarding process is. That's why there's multiple of those, making sure that this person isn't susceptible to schizophrenia, making sure that they're not intoxicated with other substances, making sure that they're not violent or suicidal. We obviously don't want to endanger any of our therapists. We have about 15 therapists, and we need to, take their safety into account. We don't want somebody tripping and then just going nuts on them. So you have to take all those precautions. So not everybody is even eligible to participate in something like this. And I guess in theory, yeah, you could rewire somebody's brain and it could end up worse. I haven't really heard of that, at least in this environment, I haven't really heard of that happening because that's the job of the therapist, is to guide this person. And so wherever that neural pathway is going to land when it all wears off, I think where it's going to land, because again, you have a very specific neural pathway to this memory that's causing PTSD and trauma. When we're on psilocybin, everything lights up now, everything like a freaking Christmas tree. It's wild. And then as it wears off, where that neural pathway is going to land, I think depends on the ability of the therapist to keep this person focusing on positivity or solutions or the real reality, and not what their previous neural pathway was telling them was actual reality. It's like the world is not ending every time you think about this, or like every time you think about this, it doesn't mean additional people are dying. It's one person passed away. You need to leave it like that. And don't allow this feeling of guilt or sadness to overwhelm you every single time you think about this. So yeah, anyways, so it's really the therapist guiding them and make sure when it wears off, it lands in a positive pathway.
Well, I was saying, what about like reaching potential? Like there's that movie Limitless, if you've seen it, where there was this pill that supposedly the guy heard some language in French or Japanese once, and then all of a sudden he's fluent in it because we only use a certain percentage of our brain at a time. Are there any indications with that for someone like sports or mental, trying to reach the limits of, expand past the limits of their potential? Is there any application like that, or is it just purely for trauma and things like that?
No, there's definitely applications for that. There's definitely applications, and there's a time and a place for that. It's just not what we're focusing on.
Sure.
But I mean, let's keep in mind, like Steve Jobs, was an absolute advocate of hallucinogenics. Elon Musk has also, is done them, going to Burning Man and stuff like that. There's a lot of like really remarkable people out there that have been incredibly successful that will actually attribute a lot of the way they think to either psilocybin or LSD, because we're not talking about doing this type of stuff all the time just for fun,
Correct.
We're talking about like basically for strategic reasons, or for therapeutic purposes. And so in that sense, yes, you could, especially if you're in a creative field or you need to be innovative in some way, or somehow your insecurities are holding you back, you could use these type of therapies to open yourself up, either to the world or open up the capabilities of your mind.
Get over writer's block and things like that.
Yeah. I remember like when I was always terrified to do it because of my sort of lucid imagination. I always assumed that I was susceptible to schizophrenia. So I was always really scared to even touch that stuff. I stayed away from it for a long time. And it wasn't until I was like in the right place with the right people, right situation, right everything, that I took a risk and gave it a try. And it was really remarkable, a really remarkable experience to see what it is that our minds are capable of doing. It's unbelievable. We think we have an understanding of what our minds can do. And, you see all these movies or you hear stories about hallucinations. And you think you understand what that is. Until you experience it, you're just like, oh my God, I didn't know my brain and my eyeballs could do that. And that definitely, especially if you're in a creative field, or again, you need to be progressive and innovative in some way, like Steve Jobs was, to be able to make, really interesting, connecting these dots that no one else would connect. It's definitely a useful tool there.
Yeah. And Chris, I think it's a reframing the way you see something, right? And so to the extent that reframing the way you see something affects how you approach that thing, it has the potential to be beneficial. So whether that's sports, whether that's, trauma, whatever. I mean, these types of things are going to open your mind to, seeing the different angles, seeing the angles that you couldn't see before for whatever reason, some kind of blockage, some kind of obstruction, something that's preventing that. Generally based in ego, really, and based in the way that our minds make sense of the world. We categorize things. We have to, this is this is that, this is the way it works, and this kind of like challenges that, like, is it really that way, right? So, I think it's like a restructuring, reframing, and I think that's where it's valuable.
You can see the front and the back of the Statue of David simultaneously.
Hey, I'm talking about right profile, left profile. That's what I was talking about the whole time. I'm a true Orthodox. I don't know, you guys.
We know what you're talking about, Brian. Well, awesome, guys. Well, that's fascinating, Tony. And I think that this topic is going to continue to get more and more attention as time goes on. So we really do wish you the best of luck with all of your business ventures. Now, I want to end with one of your, I don't want to call it a passion project because this is actually a business, but something that you are passionate about, and that was this this Survivor game. What was that called again? The Survivor thing that you're doing?
Survival games.
Survival games. Okay, not Survivor, but similar actually. So tell us a little bit about that and how people can get involved with it.
Yeah, that was actually one where I had zero intention of building a business out of it. So one of my passions is just being outdoors. I've always had this interesting connection with nature. I do believe that our natural state is to live out in nature, not in these artificial walls with all this technology and everything else.
Bro.
For millions of years, we have lived like in nature, at one with nature. And it's only been the last couple hundred years that we're living like this. And this is not natural for us.
That's why we're so dysfunctional.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to be out in the woods. We need to be grounded. We need to be foraging. We need to be immersed in it. I just feel better. I can't explain. I just feel better when I'm out there. And so for like 10 years or so, I've been really big into foraging, like edible wild plants and medicinal wild plants, gourmet mushrooms, for cooking, hunting, of course, all those different things. And so, and naturally with that, as sort of like a gadget guy and like a tinkerer, bushcraft sort of comes into play there. And so my buddy and I, we're building traps or building tree houses or building shelters or all this stuff. And so I had this fun idea to get some people together here in Portland, and it was originally going to be called the Redneck Olympics, and it would be like a weekend, it'd be a couple of days, and we'd have to like build. There'd be a competition to like build a primitive fire, like a bow drill fire, and then maybe some archery and maybe some axe throwing and a few other things. And I couldn't round up my friends for some reason. Like they would all pretend like they were interested, but then they would just bail out. And after 2 years of getting annoyed of that, Phil and I were talking and we're like, what if we just put it on Facebook as like an open event and let anybody, in the Portland area, maybe we can make some new friends and invite some people that want to come join us for some bushcraft. And so we decided to do that. And before we did it though, we changed the name from the Redneck Olympics to the PNW Survival Games. And then I'm a marketing person, obviously. And so I wanted to make it look cool. So I made it look cool. We got a cool logo and all the branding and the outline and the agenda and everything that comes with it. And we put it on Facebook. And it just exploded immediately. We were like, what just happened? We thought like maybe a couple people would sign up and we'd make some new friends. And the whole thing sold out immediately. And so we realized that we weren't going to be able to just do this in the backyard. So we had to like go around. I found a campground. I ended up renting out the whole campground for the weekend. Then we also like simultaneously that it sold out. There's buzz going around the survival community, and literally celebrity survivalists started calling me and saying they wanted to be a part of it and they wanted to be part of the show. And I'm like, what show? This is not a show. This is just a weekend barbecue thing. So everybody thought it was much bigger and more established than it actually was. And when you have momentum, you got to roll with it. You just got to adapt and make it work.
Yes.
So we got the bigger property. We ordered more gear. We branded the hell out of the event with banners and flags and sponsors and everything else. And this all happened in 60 days. Like,
wow.
I thrive under pressure. And so this was like a holiday for me. I loved it. It was an absolute adventure from 60 days going from posting it on Facebook as a backyard barbecue to having this huge production, which is a lot like Tough Mudder or Spartan Race.
Yep.
It's a lot like that. And then a group that wanted to pitch this as a reality show asked if they could come film. So we said, hell yeah. So we had the whole camera crew there and filmed it for a pilot. And since then, that first one that we did was in October of 23. We did another one just last year in August. So about, was that 5-6 months ago? That one was filmed as well. And that one, we had even more celebrity survivalists come out, from those shows that you've all seen, like Naked and Afraid and Alone.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So we've already planted seeds with Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Discovery Channel. Right now, we're just wrapping up the editing process for our pitch meeting. And then we're going to go meet with these networks. And then also with several production companies that sell to these networks. So we'll have a couple different options of, do we want to just sell the show directly to the network, or do we want to own it, fund it ourselves with this production company, of course, and then just license it to them and then have a larger acquisition later. I'm definitely in the camp of, I want to sell this thing and offload it as soon as possible before I screw it up, because I don't know what I'm doing. I just pretend like I know what I'm doing. And
it sounds familiar.
And then so simultaneously as the show is in development now, so we do like a 2-day survival game. So the show would actually be 10 days, 10 episodes. There'd be 3 challenges per day, per episode. That's sort of the plan. So simultaneous to that, we're also going after the founders of Spartan Race and Tough Mudder.
Nice.
And we're going to try to license or sell the live events to them, because we think it would fit perfectly in their portfolio. Yeah. So they can do the events nationwide. The TV show is basically a big commercial for the events. Anybody that does the events and enjoys it, they're going to say, I want to do the bigger version. I want to do the 10-day version, and then so the events and the show are going to just be promoting each other.
I think that's perfect. I've done both the Tough Mudder and the Spartan, and a lot of people don't want to do that much running, but they love to be outdoors for X number of days and do activity. So I think it's going to work out great and be right in line with what they're doing.
Yeah,
Chris, I knew you would like this. As soon as he said that, Tony, you asked me if I knew anyone who'd enjoy this, and I was like, well, obviously Chris Teeters and Brian, if his ankle ever heals,
I'll do it with you, bro.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
So how do we get involved with this, Tony? I mean, I think the three of us are in, but how do our listeners get involved? And you said the next one I think is coming up around August, not a set date though, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be, I think, August 16th or 17th, somewhere around there. Okay. That third week in August, and you can go to PNW Survival Games. So that stands for Pacific Northwest Survival Games. The show in the future is just going to be called Survival Games. We have plans to do it all over the country and in different countries as well. But yeah, you can go to pnwsurvivalgames.com and you can sign up there. There's only going to be 50 slots or 25 teams. So basically 50 people. And so you're going to be, so it's you and a partner. So it's 2-person teams. You'll end up doing 6 challenges over the course of 2 days. Before each challenge, there's a 30-minute lesson from a celebrity survivalist on a specific skill, but you don't know how that's going to apply to the challenge. You're just learning a bushcraft skill or a survival skill, like how to build a shelter or how to build a bow and arrow from scratch, or how to do a tourniquet if someone's bleeding out, or how to build a stretcher to carry them out. So you're going to learn a skill for 30 minutes from a celebrity survivalist, and then the host comes up and explains what the 60-minute challenge is going to be. And now you and your partner have 60 minutes to complete this challenge utilizing the skill you just learned, and you're competing against all the other teams. And so there'll be 6 of those over the course of 2 days. And then the grand finale is probably going to be the same as it always is, which is always the raft building. So you and a partner will have 60 minutes to build a raft, go navigate down the river, collect all the different flags. Then you have to navigate back up the river and then cross the finish line. And that one's just really fun to it's summer, it's hot, it's good to get in the river and just do that ultimate log rafting challenge. It's a really good time. And you get to hang out with celebrity survivalists, like the people, like your survival heroes that you've seen on these shows. A lot of them are there, it's a very tight-knit community.
Awesome. Well, I'm sold. So you'll definitely see us there, and we'll post that information on the Orthodontic Pearls Facebook group. So all of you guys out there are encouraged to sign up and come join us out there in August. We want to thank Tony for his generous time today and speaking with us. I've learned a lot. Had a great time chatting with you, Tony. If you like what you're hearing, you could do us a huge favor and make sure to like and subscribe to our podcast. Share it with your friends. We are the fastest growing orthodontic podcast out there. We just found that out today. So we would love it for you to help us grow. And of course, we're not just talking about orthodontic pearls here. We're talking about life, business, balance, what have you. So again, share with your friends, and we'd really appreciate it. Make sure to tune in next time when our guest will be Dr. Adam Schulhoff. And with that, we want to thank all of you for staying with us today, and have a great day.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.